The rain hammered against the windows of our small cottage in the Cotswolds, mimicking the relentless pounding in my chest. My name is Alistair, and until a few weeks ago, my life with my wife, Bronwyn, felt like a perfectly orchestrated symphony. We'd met at a literature festival in Hay-on-Wye, bonding over a shared love for Keats and a penchant for strong, milky tea. An IT specialist, found solace in her artistic spirit. Bronwyn was a potter, her hands capable of coaxing beauty from shapeless clay. We'd been married for 15 years, a milestone we celebrated with a quiet dinner at our favorite pub, the Wild Thyme. Bronwyn had given me a framed photograph of us taken on our honeymoon in Santorini, the whitewashed buildings gleaming under the Aegean sun. To many more years of sunsets and shared dreams, Shed toasted, her eyes sparkling with affection. Or so I thought. The first discordant note in our symphony arrived subtly, like a barely audible hum. Bronwyn, usually an open book, became increasingly guarded with her phone. She'd flinch if I entered the room while she was texting, her fingers dancing across the screen with an urgency I hadn't seen before. Her explanations were vague, just work stuff, or chatting with the girls. I dismissed it as stress. She'd been preparing for a major exhibition at a gallery in Bath. Then came the late nights at the studio. Bronwyn claimed she needed to put in extra hours to finish her pieces. I'd offered to drive her, but Shed always declined, insisting she preferred the solitude of the late hours. I started making dinner for one more often than for two. The silence in the cottage grew heavier, punctuated only by the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. One Tuesday, I decided to surprise Bronwyn with a visit to her studio. I packed a thermos of her favorite Earl Grey tea and a slice of lemon drizzle cake from Mrs. Higgins' bakery in town. As I drove down the winding country lanes, the anticipation of seeing her face light up filled me with a warmth I hadn't felt in weeks. The studio was in a converted barn on the outskirts of the village. As I approached, I could hear music drifting from inside a low, bluesy tune that wasn't Bronwyn's usual fare. I parked the car and walked towards the entrance, the thermos and cake clutched in my hands. That's when I saw him. He was standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the soft light of the studio. Tall, with a shock of unruly brown hair and a confident swagger, he looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine. I recognized him instantly. Rhys, a sculptor from Cardiff who'd been featured in several art publications. Bronwyn had mentioned him once, praising his innovative use of recycled materials. They were embracing, not a friendly hug but a deep, lingering embrace filled with a passion that made my stomach churn. His hand was caressing her back, his fingers tracing the curve of her spine. Bronwyn was leaning into him, her eyes closed, a soft smile playing on her lips. The thermos slipped from my grasp, shattering on the cobblestones. The sound echoed in the stillness of the evening, and they both turned towards me, their faces etched with shock and guilt. Bronwyn's eyes widened. "Alistair," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. "It's not what you think, but it was exactly what I thought." The image of them in each other's arms was seared into my memory, a brand of betrayal that would forever mark my soul. I didn't say a word. I simply turned and walked back to my car, the shattered thermos a pathetic metaphor for my broken heart. The drive home was a blur of tears and disbelief. I kept replaying the scene in my head, each repetition twisting the knife deeper. How could she? How could she betray me like this after all these years? We had built a life together, a home, a partnership based on trust and love. Or so I believed. When Bronwyn finally arrived home hours later, her face was pale and drawn. She tried to explain, to apologize, but the words sounded hollow and meaningless. She claimed it was a mistake, a moment of weakness, that she still loved me. But I couldn't hear her. The trust was gone, shattered into a million pieces like the thermos on the cobblestones. "I don't understand," I said, my voice trembling. "What did I do wrong? Why would you do this to us?" She looked down, avoiding my gaze. "It's not about you, Alistair," she said softly. "It's about me." I felt stifled. I needed something more. Her words were like a final blow, crushing what little hope I had left. "Something more," I repeated, my voice rising. "After 15 years, after everything we've shared." She didn't answer. She couldn't. The truth was written all over her face, a truth I had been too blind to see for too long. The next few weeks were a living hell. We existed in a state of Cold War, barely speaking, each occupying a separate corner of the cottage. I couldn't bear to look at her, to touch her, to even be in the same room with her. The scent of her perfume, once a comfort, now made me nauseous. I consulted a solicitor, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Penelope who specialized in divorce cases. She listened patiently to my story, her expression sympathetic but professional. "You have grounds for divorce based on adultery," she said, "and given the circumstances, you're likely to receive a favorable settlement." Money was the last thing on my mind. All I wanted was to escape, to erase Bronwyn from my life and start over. But Penelope advised me to protect myself, to ensure I wasn't left financially vulnerable. I reluctantly agreed. As I began to sift through our finances, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. Bronwyn had been secretly transferring money from our joint account into a private account in her name. Over the past year, she had siphoned off a significant sum, enough to buy a small flat in Cardiff. I confronted her with the evidence, my voice shaking with rage. "What is this, Bronwyn?" I demanded. "Are you planning to run away with him?" She denied it at first, but when I showed her the bank statements, she broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. "I was going to tell you," she wailed. "I just didn't know how." "Tell me what?" I thundered. "That you've been cheating on me and stealing my money." She admitted everything. She had fallen in love with Rhys, she said, and they had been planning to start a new life together in Cardiff. The flat was their love nest, a place where they could escape the constraints of their marriages. "Their marriages," I repeated, my mind reeling. "You mean he's married too?" She nodded, her face buried in her hands. "His wife doesn't understand him," she sobbed. "He needs someone who appreciates his art, who supports his vision." The hypocrisy of her words was staggering. She had accused me of stifling her creativity, of not understanding her artistic needs. Yet she was doing the same thing to Rhys's wife, a woman she had never even met. That's when I decided I couldn't let them get away with it. I wouldn't become a victim, a doormat for them to wipe their feet on. I would fight back, not with anger or violence, but with intelligence and cunning. I started by gathering evidence of Bronwyn's affair and her financial misdeeds. I hired a private investigator, a discreet and resourceful man named Gareth, who uncovered a trail of emails, text messages, and hotel receipts that painted a damning picture of their relationship. Gareth also discovered that Rhys had a history of infidelity. He had cheated on his wife several times in the past, each time promising to change, only to repeat the pattern. His wife, a kind and unassuming woman named Eira, was completely unaware of his latest transgression. I felt a pang of sympathy for Eira. She was an innocent victim, just like me, caught in the crossfire of their selfish desires. I decided to reach out to her, to warn her about Rhys's true nature. It was a difficult conversation. Eira was initially skeptical, refusing to believe that her husband could be capable of such deceit. But when I presented her with the evidence Gareth had collected, she broke down, her world shattering around her. Together, Eira and I hatched a plan. We would expose Bronwyn and Rhys, not just to their spouses but to the entire art world. We would reveal their lies, their betrayals, and their financial improprieties. We would strip them of their reputations and their careers. Our opportunity came at the opening of Bronwyn's exhibition in Bath. The gallery was packed with art critics, collectors, and fellow artists. Bronwyn was radiant, basking in the attention, completely oblivious to the storm that was about to break. As she began her speech, thanking her supporters and praising her muse, Eira and I stepped forward. We held up enlarged copies of the incriminating emails and text messages, projecting them onto a screen behind her. The room fell silent, the air thick with tension. Bronwyn's face drained of color. She tried to deny the evidence, to claim it was fabricated, but the truth was undeniable. The audience gasped, their faces etched with shock and disgust. Then Eira spoke, her voice clear and strong. She recounted Rhys's history of infidelity, his lies, and his manipulations. She described the pain and humiliation she had endured, the betrayal that had shattered her trust. Rhys, who had been standing in the back of the room, tried to escape, but the crowd blocked his path. He was surrounded, his face flushed with shame and anger. The fallout was immediate and devastating. Bronwyn's exhibition was shut down, her reputation in tatters. Galleries refused to display her work, and collectors demanded their money back. Rhys was fired from his teaching position at the university in Cardiff, his career as a sculptor effectively over. Bronwyn and Rhys's affair imploded under the weight of their own deceit. They turned on each other, blaming each other for their downfall. Their love nest in Cardiff became a battleground of accusations and recriminations. I filed for divorce, and the courts granted me a generous settlement, including the proceeds from the sale of the flat in Cardiff. Bronwyn was left with nothing, her dreams of a new life shattered. I moved away from the Cotswolds, selling the cottage and buying a small apartment in London. I focused on my career, throwing myself into my work with a renewed sense of purpose. I took up photography, finding solace in capturing the beauty of the city. It took time, but eventually I healed. The scars of Bronwyn's betrayal remained, but they no longer defined me. I learned to trust again, to love again, to open my heart to new possibilities. Years later, I received a letter from Eira. She had divorced Rhys and was living a happy and fulfilling life. She had found a new partner, a kind and compassionate man who cherished her for who she was. "Thank you, Alistair," she wrote. "You saved me from a lifetime of misery. You gave me the courage to leave, to start over, to find happiness again." I smiled, a genuine smile that reached my eyes. I had found my own happiness, too. I had survived Bronwyn's betrayal, and in doing so, I had discovered a strength and resilience I never knew I possessed. The symphony of my life had been disrupted, but I had learned to compose a new melody, one filled with hope, healing, and the promise of a brighter future.